Hi, my name is Betsy Kemp, and I proudly serve on the restaurant marketing team here at OpenTable. We're so grateful to welcome you today to In It Together, our weekly webinar series. If you like what you hear, we hope you'll consider joining us for future webinars each Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Before we get started, a few quick housekeeping items. If you have questions along the way, please use the Q&A box in the top right corner of your console. We'll save some time towards the end of our conversation to answer some of your questions. In the resources list section on the bottom left, we have linked out to our restaurant blog, our COVID-related resource center, today's featured charity, and the registration page for future episodes. The webinar will be recorded and shared out with all of you afterwards. And with that, I'm delighted to now turn it over to the host of our series, our Chief Operating Officer, Andrea Johnston.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. I know there are hundreds of folks on the line tuning in. These have been just tough times over these past few weeks, months, personally, professionally, and absolutely for our industry. I'm proud of the work that OpenTable has been doing, and I'm open to more options on things that we're trying to do to help support the restaurant community during this period. We have a resource center where we're showing data by cities, tips for reopening. We've just launched our open door pricing, which is free subscription fees, free covers, in Q3, 50% covers in Q4 in exchange for a contract through 2021, because we know how hard it is to get back on your feet with the cash flow, et cetera. We will also have our product leaders on, I believe it's on June 10th, who are going to talk through some of the product vision. We're really pivoting the way we think about things in a COVID world and what would be most useful for our restaurants. Is it native takeout? Is it, more ticketed experiences, things like that? So stay tuned there. And then, of course, my favorite is this webinar series. We've heard from so many restaurateurs that they're really yearning for connection. They're really yearning for ideas from thought leaders out there. And so that was the impetus of this. I think this is our sixth one, and I'm thrilled. This one is called Calling All Leaders. We've got Kevin Boehm and Naomi Pomeroy here. Sean Feeney was supposed to join, but something came up last minute, so unfortunately he's not here. And so thank you, Naomi, for jumping in. By way of background, Naomi owns Beast, award-winning chef out of Portland. Kevin has been in the restaurant industry for decades, opened up over 30 restaurants, and is the co-founder, co-CEO of the BOKA group out of Chicago. So they're here to talk about their amazing work with the Independent Restaurant Coalition, as well as how you lead through times like this. They're both wonderful leaders, and so it'd be great to get some tips and thoughts from them there. So to kick it off, Naomi, why don't I ask you, how have the past few weeks been for you?
Thanks for asking. I mean, probably like they've been for everybody else. I mean, trying to keep busy. Everyone I talk to seems to be in a way busier than they've ever been during this period, even if they're at home. I think a lot of us are just trying to figure out, what's next? How do we pivot? Sometimes, we are just drinking too much and baking too much bread, trying to forget about how to pivot. But I spend a lot of time on phone calls actually with that guy, Kevin, and I'm excited to see him here. So mostly I find myself on the phone all day, learning lots of things about politics that I never thought I would need to know, but
First of all, saying that I've been in the business for decades makes me sound like I'm 96. So I'm not
Sorry, Kevin.
You look good for 96, Kevin.
He sure does.
It's the lighting. So yeah, listen, like everybody else, we went from state-mandated closure to triage, trying to take care of our employees and close responsibly, pretty much straight into the Independent Restaurant Coalition advocacy, and at the same time trying to keep the company solvent. And on one side, it's been sad, frustrating, tiring, devastating. And on the other side, you're in a foxhole with some of the greatest people ever, including Naomi. And there's a lot of camaraderie and love. I mean, a lot of these people didn't know each other before. Naomi and I think knew of each other, but we'd never really, and now we've become friends through this whole thing. And part of that makes you want to get up every day and fight. We do a phone call every single morning, and it certainly helps. It's like a support group as well as being an advocacy group. So just trying every day to meet at that intersection of being solvent, taking care of our employees and making sure that they're safe and happy, and at the same time trying to move the needle for the entire restaurant industry.
That's right. Well said.
So talk to us a little bit how you got engaged with the Independent Restaurant Coalition and how that's working. I know there are a number of chefs and restaurateurs involved there doing such critical work.
Yeah. What'd you say?
So we were on that same initial phone call together, right?
Yeah, that I actually looked in my calendar to scroll back and see when that was, way back in March, 18th. Now it's like March 122nd or whatever it is today. Just kidding. That's when my husband wakes up and tells me that it's like still March. Yeah, so we received a phone call from Andrew Chasson, who is, do you say Chasen or Chasson?
I say Chasen.
Kevin.
Chasen.
Okay, Chasen. I think you're right. And he works at Creative Artist Agency in the chef's department, and somebody that I knew, not because he represents me, but because he's a huge Prince fan, and so am I, and that's how we met, talking about Prince actually in Chicago at a Beard Award party 5 or 6 years, whenever that was, years ago. And so, we received this call, and it was like this call to action. Would you help us save restaurants? And I think in that first day, we didn't really know how we were going to do it. There were some really amazing people on that call, Catherine Miller and Mitchell Davis from the James Beard Foundation. We had Kwame and Tom and, like a lot of people by first name basis on that call as well. And I think the important thing to know about the development of the IRC is we're trying to figure out how do we take this little phone call and take it out into the world. And I think we realized quickly we needed to raise some capital, try to see if we could, pay some advisors, get a lobbying firm behind us, have this great PR support. And we got this great advisory team together, and everybody is, wildly discounting their rates and helping to support, because I think, the cool thing about restaurants is it's a bipartisan issue. Everybody needs to eat dinner, breakfast, lunch. And so it seems to have widespread support. And I think it's very clear that the industry, as Kevin was speaking to earlier, we closed down first in Oregon. We made this little tiny coalition called the Portland Independent Restaurant Association. And it was literally just a COVID emergency response. What the heck are we going to do? How do we close down? How do we support our staff? How do we be safe? And, the IRC gave us an opportunity to get answers to some of those questions and start to see how we could, move our voices powerfully through legislative, asks. And, we've come a long way in 7 weeks. I think I heard this morning that we're up to 60,000 participants. We have these morning calls that Kevin was talking about. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we have these coalition calls with about 100 people on them. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have a slightly smaller advisory call that we do. And, it's just been incredible to see how much. I think one of the biggest moments of honor I've had in it is just hearing from our advisory members, our contributors, in Washington, D.C. I've been to Washington, D.C. That's such a lie. I've been to the White House. I've had lots of time there, but I don't know anything about the political system, really how it works in, the meat of it. And we've been hearing that collectively, we've gotten more traction on the Hill in a short period of time than anybody they've ever seen. I said, that's because you take people who are used to working 16 hours a day and you say, you don't have a job right now anymore. And what the heck else are we going to do with our days? So I spend 16 hours a day working on the IRC, and I know Kevin does too. So Kevin, what's your experience been like?
Well, I'm fascinated by transferable skills. Like when we hire people, I don't usually care whether they've been in the restaurant business or not. Do I like you? Do I think you're smart? We could teach you how to hold a plate. Well, all these people that are on this call every single day are brilliant people, and they're just using those skills that they've learned in the restaurant business. And all of a sudden, everybody's amateur lobbyists and advocates and influencing policy. And Naomi's right. It's been fascinating to see how the sausage is made. And once you see that, and when you're in the center of it, it's like, oh, okay, well, these people are actually supposed to be representative of us. And maybe we didn't really have a voice before. So that's exactly what was happening. And so I'm just so glad that we're now kind of in the arena. And at the same time, they seem to be showing us some level of respect and listening to us, because it seems to be moving the needle a little bit. And I was saying before, it's frustrating because in the restaurant business, you know whether you did well or not instantly. You know, you serve them plates of food and drinks and you give them good hospitality, you put it in a nice setting, and they tell you at the end of it, you did good or you did poorly. In this process, you plant a lot of seeds and it takes a while for them to bloom. So we are also a bunch of control freaks on the phone that have no control. So it does get a little crazy and people get tense at times. But there's been a learning curve, and I think every day we're starting to understand it. And we're also insulated by people who really know what they're doing, including Thorne Runn and our executive director and all these people. So it's been a process, and it's been a good one.
That's incredible. Yeah, my first job out of college, I was a lobbyist for women's health. So I knew that way back then, and things do take a really long time to get through. And you've got to learn how to navigate in those, types of environments. I heard that there was a meeting on Monday at the White House with a number of folks from the IRC. Do you have any insight on how that went and then what types of impact those conversations are having?
Yeah, we do. We have some insight because we watched the live stream of it, and very, very, very proud of our ability as the IRC to get seats at that table. I mean, really fabulous networked, all hands on deck effort that happened to make that go. And it seemed like from the response, one of the things that was impressive about, I don't know how, I know it's been recorded and you could find a copy of it. And even though there are parts of it that certainly are painful to watch, I have to say, I think that the shining moment for me was when it was realized in the room that, we had taken the time to get together beforehand. And, we're getting together as, the IRC is getting together with representatives from the NRA and, someone from Panera Bread. I'm sorry, I don't remember everybody's names, but it's like, there's a lot of restaurants that on that panel that maybe weren't necessarily like independent, and yet the ask was pretty a unified ask, asking to fix the PPP and extend it out, and everyone was in support of that. So I think, again, finding the channels where there is agreement on how to save the industry, and that's another thing about the IRC. And one thing that's interesting about it is that even though you do see sometimes in the media big names, Tom on MSNBC talking, or, Andrew Zimmer's talking, I mean, the IRC is made up of a lot of different styles of restaurants, and some big, some small, like mine has 26 seats. And so I think, it's important for us to find those places where we can support all restaurants of all sizes. And I felt like that happened in that White House conversation, even though I was afraid that it wasn't going to. So I feel really, really proud of that work.
That's incredible. Go ahead.
I think what you found very early on, and what we found very early on, was that most politicians didn't really understand how our businesses operate, and why would they? They're very, very specific. And being able to be a part of the conversation where you're sitting around a table and talk about why PPP works for us or why it doesn't work for us is so incredibly important. So being able to get an invitation to that event, which, Will and Thomas and Sean, all members of the IRC who got to speak about it, they were basically representing the entire industry, saying we need more help in terms of a PPP fund that gets us to the open part, and a stabilization fund that keeps us open. So it was so incredibly important that they just heard that as a representation of everyone at that table, and that's what they were there for, because PPP was designed on the fly. It was, they wanted to do something and do something very, very quickly. So they built a boat in a very short amount of time, and then when we weren't able to open on April 12th. We found out real quickly that boat had like 15 holes in it. But that was not really, Congress didn't know at that point how long of a problem this was going to be. So now what our big ask is, now that we do see what it is, help us as an industry that is 11.1 million people that work in independent restaurants, is 4% of our GDP, the largest private employer in the United States. Now, if you look at this, help us. We've been helping businesses historically culpable of their own demise for so many years. Chrysler got $1.5 billion in the late 70s because they couldn't properly build an economical small car. You know, we're just saying, we don't want a bailout. We want the opportunity to get back to work because we're so important to American society, to cities, to neighborhoods. And so that's all we're asking for. And right now, 2 very small changes with PPP can make that happen. If we can change the origination date or change this 8-week period to a 24-week period and change it till we don't have to get back up to 100% FTE until the end of the year, those 2 very small changes can change everything for this industry. And so that's why we were there. That's what we're asking for. And I really think it's something that can get done, but you need a lot of squeaky wheels out there saying it. And that's why we're here saying it again.
That's right.
Yep. Truly, tons of leadership across the board at all sizes of restaurants, getting that through. I want to pivot for a second. I think they're great managers and I think they're great leaders, and I don't think it's the same thing. And whether you're the leader of a 1 restaurant, you're the leader of 20 restaurant group, or you're a leader at a company like mine, great leaders inspire people to keep going even in times of challenge, but they also have to make the difficult decisions, like we had to RIF people, we had to furlough people. So talk to us a little bit about your leadership style or folks on your team, just to share with others on the call.
Yeah, for me, I tend to always default to just being very, very honest with people. And that even, is in my own personal, when we start thinking about using our voices and coming out and being politically active on our Instagram pages, for example, always comes with a risk, it can. And I think you have to use that wisely and carefully. We know that we're in the hospitality industry and we want to, be supportive of all different viewpoints and be inclusive when we're talking about our restaurant spaces and just in life. And frankly, I think you get, you catch more flies with honey or whatever the phrase is. I use that to inform my choices on how I speak, publicly. These days, I don't think I used to be very good at that. I used to be really, up in arms all the time. And I still think it's important to say, how you feel about something and be honest about it. But I also think finding that sweet spot in the middle doesn't alienate people and tends to be a little bit more bipartisan. And again, we're very lucky because the cause here is restaurants. And everyone wants to go out to eat, and no matter if your favorite place is an old steakhouse that's been open for 150 years, or if you're into the Vietnamese noodle shop down the street, you can find a lot of commonality at the table, and so I think that that's important. And then when it comes to leading in a time of crisis, I find that being vulnerable and being honest works really well for me. Telling my staff, hey, I got the PPP and I'm not sure how to use it. And, I have a plan that could work, but I'm going to try to hold on a little, just being very in communication. And when I feel like being an open book is better. If I've got some servers, I'm not sure when I pivot my model, if I'm going to be able to bring them back or not, so I said, if you guys need to get other work, I understand. I'm going to try to make a new model that can support you as well, but I won't know that until a bit down the road. And if you need to find something in the interim, that's okay. I get it. I know that we're here for each other. So just trying to be honest.
Yeah, great. I think great leaders, you can't just be a leader when you want to or during good times. Moments like this, you need to really think about everybody and everything. And it starts with being honest, and at the same time, being hopeful and setting a tone for everyone. I think we're really lucky as a company that we have a great group of collective intelligence. So we can sit around a table or sit around a Zoom and talk about all these issues. And all these people were put together on our team for a reason. I always say that we put a heist team together. The heist team has the getaway car guy and the explosive person, and so that's how we put people together. Abby, that works for our team, is the most compassionate person I know. She's also the most risk-adverse person I know, and that's why she's got a spot at that table. And so, making all these decisions together with Ian, our CEO, and Jamie, our CFO, and myself and Rob, and all these people, has been an exercise in finding the right answer. Let's find the right answer together, and it's that answer that gets us to that intersection of doing the right thing, being responsible, and keeping our company open at the same time. And so I think that leadership comes from first finding the right answer and then over communicating with everybody once you've found that right answer.
100%
Kevin, you're
agree.
making me so jealous. Kevin, you're making me so jealous that you have that support network. I mean, again, I have a great general manager and an awesome CDC, but it's just, I run this 26-seat restaurant, and then we have a cocktail bar across the street, and that sounds like a great support network. And I'm realizing, Kevin, as you're talking, that maybe one of the reasons why I am so passionate about the IRC and why I needed to join it is to be able to have those conversations and reflect and bounce back, because without that, I mean, I know a lot of your viewers here today probably are running small restaurants, and maybe it's just them kind of trying to make their way through. And I would say that as much as you can involve yourself, and if you're looking to join the IRC too, we're at saverestaurants.com, and you can go and check us out and get some directives on how to help out too, because I know that that's given me a lot of inspiration throughout the day. But being able to reflect back is so awesome.
It is. I spent a lot of years on an island, and my dreams back in those days was being at a table with people like Naomi and Will and Kwame and Tom and all these people on the IRC that are so amazing. It is like a support group for everybody, and the IRC will not go away when eventually there's a vaccine. This is a coalition that is going to be around for forever, because there are more issues in the restaurant business than just what we're going through right now. We need to be a different industry moving forward.
Yeah, that's 100%. The silver lining in all of this. It's so great that we're able to have this as a silver lining moment, because we're realizing, of course, that in some ways restaurateurs have been so busy, just eking by and surviving, and haven't had a chance to go out and really communicate with our communities about what it takes to do what we do. And we're realizing that we have some makeup work to do in that area to explain to both politicians and leaders and just people out in the world, this is why food needs to cost what it does, and that kind of thing. Like we have to educate, and that is part of our responsibility. So I know that work will continue.
Yeah, fantastic. It should. Well, it sounds like absolutely you're affecting change through this, but also it's extending your community and getting to know folks. One other part of being a leader is you worry about people, right? You worry about your teams, you worry about your families, and people working from home right now, which is no easy task, especially with shelter in place. How do you take care of yourself or keep yourselves, in good spirits through times like this?
I talk about this all the time. I think Restoration of Your Soul was the name of my welcome conference 2 years ago. And I got to be honest, I haven't been following my own policies. They've been 15, 16-hour days every day. I haven't slept well. I've not eaten well. And at some point that's got to change. I have been running my stairs and working out still. That's the one thing that's kept me kind of sort of balanced. But it is true that it's pretty impossible to restore others unless you've restored yourself. And I got to start taking my own advice here pretty soon because, you know, I'm dragging. A lot's gone on in my life the last 10 weeks, I'm some days I wake up and I feel pretty beat up. So I need to start finding a little balance. How about you, Naomi? You finding anything?
God, Kevin, I'm glad you took that question first. I was like, oh, please let Kevin answer first. Because I don't have a great answer for that one either. I feel like maybe I've noticed in my community as I ask people, seems like this 8-week period of the shelter in place, which is about, you know, we're a little bit halfway through that 8th week, I think, here. And I feel like something happened at the beginning of 8 weeks where people were like, oh, I feel not great. Been drinking more than I don't do normally and just eating a lot of bread and, just getting through. And I think that sometimes it's been helping me when people talk about this as a grieving process, in terms of realizing that we're at this real change moment. Like when I toast clinked glasses with my staff on March 14th before we closed, I didn't know that it was possible that my restaurant would never come back again the way that it was. And now that's really the reality that I'm facing. So there is a process of being like, oh my God, this is real. Like, we are having to potentially furlough people that we won't be able to have come back on, or we have to make these hard decisions and calls. And I didn't get to say goodbye to like I wanted to. 12 and a half years of dedication and work on a project that I was so happy with, that I could have seen myself doing forever. But, we have 2 big long tables and, 26 seats in a teeny tiny little area. And obviously I'm going to have to make some changes. So letting myself be like a little too much carbs and not enough exercise is probably okay for a short period of time, but I'm with Kevin. I'm ready to get started. Spring training, my brother's been sheltering in place with me, and I think I'm going to order some boxing gloves, and we could just kind of go at each other. That's my plan.
I got a ball and some gloves for my backyard because I can't fit an elliptical in my house, and it's working wonders. Do it. I have 2 more questions. Go ahead. I was going to say I have 2 more questions. You go.
I will just say real quick, I did have one moment the other night where I opened up a bottle of wine for myself. I was in my office by myself. I put Madame George by Van Morrison on repeat, and I just sat there in silence. That's probably the most peace I've had in the last 10 weeks. So Madame George off Astral Weeks, put it on. It's a deep meditation.
Great tip. I know we want to open it up to others, but I do have two more questions for you all, and then we'll cut to the public. So, what would be your greatest learnings during this period, or tips that you would want to share with anybody on the line that might help them get through this, or help them get more involved, or et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of you guys. Go ahead. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say, we need to change the model moving forward. We need to change the model moving forward. The T-shirt I bought 10 years ago for $18 is now like $45, but the burger is still $15. And the restaurant business is kind of stood still while the rest of the world has changed. And, it used to be way back in the day that you ran 30% cost of goods sold, and you ran 30% labor cost and 4% occupancy. And 16% everything else, and you had 20% profit. I mean, this is a couple decades ago, obviously. And every single year, the model gets worse. Payroll tax or property taxes have gone up. Labor has gone up. More taxes get shouldered on the backs of restaurants. And we all really need to look at the model moving forward, cut better real estate deals, have better pricing structures, and let's not keep having a model that's so fragile. This is on us to collectively have this conversation and all of us change it together. And I do believe that in the real estate world, that because traditional retail is kind of going away a bit, that there's going to be more dependency upon restaurants for developers to make their buildings make sense. And it allows for us to sign more management contracts, to have better management deals. And I think that's one of the IRC things that IRC can do, is be an advocate for restaurants to have a better structure for what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and on the heels of that, this is like a plea for me too, for all of us to be a little bit more honest with each other. I think in the past, there's been this sort of, we're in a competitive market, like absolutely, and every year that gets, more and more. I mean, 12 years ago when I opened Beast, there were 15 great restaurants in Portland, and now there's like 200, I mean, it's crazy. And I feel like, one of the most illuminating conversations I've had since this whole thing started, I was actually on a Washington Post interview with myself and with Tom Colicchio and the interviewer. And, Tom said, yeah, I lose money 4 months of the year. I kind of break even 4 months of the year. And the last 4 months of the year is the year that I make up all of that money so that, I can eke by. And, I thought, Jesus Christ, like I thought that was me, I thought like I was the one that was going through that cycle, and I was the one that was biting my nails every winter, whether I was going to make payroll and how I was going to figure it out, and come to realize that just sort of has been par for the course. And speaking of, being more profitable in the past, I mean, 12 and a half years ago when I opened, I was certainly more profitable than I have been in the last couple of years. And it's not for lack of business. It's really just for the changes and the way that things have been going. So I do agree with Kevin that we need to make these fixes. And I think part of the way that we make these fixes is by being a little bit more transparent and sharing with each other about where we're at, so we can sort of take the temperature of the group and say, all right, hey, you know what? We agree. We're all going to do this. We're all going to raise our prices so that we can, pass that on to the consumer. And once everybody starts to agree on some of those things, our power is in our collective voice.
Mm-hmm.
I also have one more little thing, which is to say that I think some of you guys might know that I started a class action lawsuit against my insurance company. And I just wanted to also, just in light of people asking what they can do other than joining the IRC, I would say my advice is, take a look at your policy. Even people who have virus exclusions, et cetera, are probably able to join these class action lawsuits. There are a lot of them forming. Anybody that wants to get in touch with me, you're more than happy to DM me on Instagram, and I'll hit you back with info on my class action. But there are a lot out there, and it's actually very easy to join. I mean, you really just need to ask for copies, certified copies of your insurance policies, your denial letters if you've been denied coverage, get them to a lawyer and have them take a look at it, because, this window is going to be only so long before these things start really getting into motion. And I just want to encourage people not to miss that window and to join up if they want some help around that area. So,
great point. My last question is, when we get through this, whenever that may be, I mean, it's been so hard for everybody. We know a lot of the restaurants are going to go under, and it's going to be hard for those of you who can stick with it, are going to have to pivot business models. What do each of you think is sort of the silver lining through this period?
I think that in moments like this, we're allowed to kind of dream without guardrails a bit, because there's no playbook in this whole thing. And I think when I started in this business, like my second place was wine bar, sushi bar, rock and roll bar in the Panhandle in the mid-90s. And I came up with that idea by just saying, well, what are my three favorite things? Sushi, wine, rock and roll. Let's make a concept out of it. And so as time goes on, I think that especially if you get bigger, your ideas get vetted more and it's filtered through so many people that you dream less, or you dream within this box. And I think right now we can all just like shove those guardrails out of the way and just say, all right, what is it that I want to be, and who do I want to be, and what do I want this industry to be moving forward? And that's kind of where my mindset is like, okay, first of all, I definitely don't want to do business with any assholes moving forward.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a good business deal or not. I think Rich Melman years ago said, you can't make a a good business deal with a bad person and a bad business deal with a good person. And I just want to do things that excite me and invigorate me. And so I think we're starting to do that again. Is like, let's be really innovative with everything that we do. I think everybody can kind of think that way a bit. Try anything.
Cool.
I totally agree. It's so funny. I was talking to my CDC yesterday and, just sort of trying to talk about the pivot. What are we going to do at Beast? And I used that phrase tabula rasa, right, which is blank slate. And I feel like the opportunity that we all have, everything is a double-edged sword, right? So at this point, it's like, yeah, things are really hectic and it sucks and we have to pivot and we have to change and we have to do all these things. And on the other side of that, if you have nothing, you also have nothing, and that can be really amazing, an incredible opportunity to paint on a blank canvas. I said to myself, what have I been enjoying most about COVID? Well, I really love being at home a little bit more. I'm happy to not be working 65 hours a week in the restaurant. I've been happy to be here. What can I design in the future that has me working 4 days a week max, 3 to 4 days a week? I think that's like a design for the future, right? How do I maximize? If I'm going to work a 14-hour day, which is my preference, I better only be working 3 or 4 of those, not
right.
5 or 6. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us all here, and it's best to look at it that way. I love Kevin for his positivity. I think we connect on that level because this is an opportunity. And even though it sucks, 15 years ago, I lost everything. I laid off 95 employees, closed 3 restaurants, got divorced, became a single mother. I thought that was like the lowest of the low. And frankly, it was. It was a lot harder than this is now. And I think it's good sometimes to reflect back on other challenges that you've come through and realize that, this is just another one of those. And usually it's just an opportunity.
Amazing. Great. Well, thank you, Betsy. Let's pass it off to you.
Yeah, we're getting some great questions coming through here, and the conversation's been really amazing. So thank you both. You mentioned that the business model really needs to change. I guess the question from this restaurateur here is like, how do we bring the community and the diners along with that? How do we bring our guests into that conversation?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, one of the things that I know I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a survey for the people that are on my email list, sort of to gauge their interest on what's next for us at Beast, which is maybe a little bit of an unconventional way of doing things, but I'm really curious what people are looking for. What have they been enjoying in their own home kitchens? What do they wish they knew more about? Do they wish they could make prettier plates of food? Like, what kind of instructions and things like that are they looking for from chefs as leaders? So I think that's, for me, that's part of it, is just engaging on that level. I know that I said in an interview that I thought Beast was probably not going to come back the way that it was. And I've received a lot of, crying and just, oh no. And, I acknowledge that is sad, but I want to help people and my guests move out of that shock and upset around the past and forward into how can we all create something together. And I feel like possibly trying to involve them in the creation of that might be great.
I think one of the scary parts of art, I think one of the scary parts of artistry is that, we all create things, we create restaurants, and then you throw it out there and the public tells you whether you did well or not. But I think that we have a lot of trust and once again, this kind of collective intelligence of this team we have. And, we're kind of getting together and trying to figure this out and pivot as best we can. I think you just need to, whatever these changes that are going to be, you got to lean into it. If you're going to do takeout, figure out how to do the best takeout you ever did in your entire life. One of the things that's really successful for us right now is, Stephanie's doing these curated grocery bags, and then she's one-stepping everything that's inside the grocery bag. And then there's a link to her cooking all the stuff that's in the grocery bag. And then there is one link to one person in there who gets a golden ticket who she private Zooms and cooks all the stuff with you in the grocery bag. And we thought it sounded like a good idea, and it ended up being great, you know? And so that's worked. I think that's going to be like this with everything, is we're going to have to pivot in certain places. We're going to try to come up with the best idea we can. And hopefully it's accepted well by the public. We're lucky to have some very loyal customers that we do definitely communicate with and talk to. And we have a black card system in our company that are our best customers, that we give, you know, special previews to and stuff like that and get feedback. So we'll utilize them as well.
That's great. Another question we have from the audience is, what continued support will hospitality workers need even once our restaurants start to reopen?
Well, you're going to have to create a safe environment for them. If you look at the pillars of success before, and if you say they were hospitality, design, and food with some sort of foundation of financial responsibility, the fifth one is now safety. So what we have to continue to do is make them feel absolutely safe with what we're doing inside of our places. And Naomi will agree with me. We've been having to live up to a high standard of public health our entire lives. If you give us a standard to get to, we'll get to it. And then we just have to convince everybody that works with us that we're going to continue to have that standard and that they're good coming back to work. That's our burden. And then, you know, we got to hope that the ramp up happens very quickly, so these people that count on a certain amount of money can still make that amount of money when they come back. That's important too. So.
And I would say to that point, Kevin, if you're feeling like you don't have clarity, like a lot of us, I mean, you know, and I look at the state of Oregon guidelines for proposed guidelines for reopening restaurants, I feel that there's some holes in there. I say, oh, really? It's just going to be recommended for people to wear face masks. It's not required. Like, and I think to myself, well, why is it required in the two states that are next to us, Washington and California? And I want to set standards of care, you know, standards that are truly going to be safe and effective. And so what we've done here locally is said, you know, we're going to take some calls with our local representatives and say, hey, you know, commissioners, city commissioners and the mayor, we want to have, you know, guidelines that are a little bit more clear than what you've given us so far. Help us out. So I would say that for those of you who are interested in that safety that Kevin's talking about, get active and involved in the safety. If you feel like legislation is coming out that's just recommended and it doesn't feel that safe to you, gather a group of other people that feel the same as you and ask for a phone meeting, because, you know, they'll take it. They want to do your work, and sometimes you have to help them do that. They don't run restaurants, you know. Your mayor doesn't run a restaurant, probably, maybe, but, you know, most likely not. And so it's important to help them understand what it's going to take for you to do that and be actively involved, not passively involved.
Yeah, one discussion I was in yesterday, there was a request, can OpenTable, you know, do contact tracing and require folks to put face masks on? It gets a little dicey in the privacy side of things on self-reporting. And so one of the things we're considering is, much like we did a no-show public service announcement video several years ago, probably doing something like this to our diners, like wear the mask sort of thing. A follow-on question I have for you that came up is, you know, hospitality is you greet people, you big smile, you know, many cases a hug, you know, at the front. That's all different now. And so I'm wondering how you're thinking about delivering hospitality with a mask on and how you're going to convey that feeling.
It's a really good
I would say, I think Kevin did. I think you have to, find the person on your team that smizes the best and get them to teach a smizing workshop. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, words are so important. Look, you know, at the end of the day, maybe part of, you know, us being at reduced capacities may allow us to have a little bit more time with those people that are in our spaces. If we do have that time and, you know, there's 6 feet of distance between the party that you're seating and the next party, you know, perhaps, you know, finding some comforting words that being a little bit more expressive vocally will end up really helping, talking through that mask. I mean, I know it's going to be a challenge, but you know, if I could go to Whole Foods and see a lady that's running her credit card with standing on one foot, running her credit card with her other foot because she doesn't have any arms, you know, if there are people out there that can do stuff like that, then we can get people to feel comforted with our words and with our smizing. We just have to think outside the box.
Yeah, like a big, huge part of hospitality is how you make people feel. That's truly what it is. So making people feel safe is a part of that entire concept. One of the things that we've been talking about doing is every other table, when we're at 50%, being the Mies table for that table next to them and laying all that stuff out, almost like a surgeon's table. Like everything that you're going to use at your table is not going to be commingled with everybody else's. Here's your table, and here's the table next to you that has all your silverware, all your glassware, all your napkins, all your everything, and it's safe. That's soigné. We could still be soigné in this world right now. So, and then if OpenTable can figure something out to where everyone can pre-order all of their meals through OpenTable beforehand, and so they've already ordered the cocktail kit and dinner A. You know, you have dinner A, dinner B, dinner C, dinner D. All I have to do with the server, welcome. If you see everything that we're going to use at your table is at the table next to you this evening. And because I already have your order, all that I need from you is who ordered which of these dinners. You figure out the position numbers, and then it's almost more hospitable that you've spent less time at the table. And so I think there are some real innovative ways to do it. We're already kind of trying to think of all these things. I think pre-ordering could be a really helpful way in the short term to make things so much more efficient. And the kitchen's going to love it, right, Naomi? If you know what everybody's going to order ahead of time, kitchen's going to love that.
Well, Kevin, I've been cheating on this one for years. You know, Beast was a set menu, no choices restaurant with 6 courses, so we never needed to know anything until we started accepting dietary restrictions a few years back. Yeah. But, you know, no, to be honest, this is so great because I joined this, webinar as a host speaker, and now I've just learned something so fantastic from Kevin. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to do that too. I like that idea of taking that empty table and setting it with all the mise en place for the group. So, wow, amazing. I got what I needed. I've received my gift. Thank you, Kevin. Love it.
Wow. Well, such amazing conversation today. I think we're out of time, but I know that we could talk for hours. Really appreciate Kevin, Naomi, and Andrea, and all of you today for taking the time to tune in. As promised, a recording of this webinar will be made available shortly. And for all the latest updates at OpenTable, we invite you to visit our restaurant.opentable.com website. We hope you will choose to join us again next Wednesday when Restaurateur Elizabeth Blau and Becca Parrish of Becca PR will dive into marketing and communications in a crisis. Until then, please stay safe, take good care, be kind to yourself and to others. Thank you.